And welcome to another episode of Patriots 4th and 2. I am your host today, Derek Havens, and joining me as always is Mr. Steve Balestrieri. This podcast is presented by PatsFans.com. Steve and I are both PatsFans.com contributors. On today's episode, we'll be talking about Jerod Mayo officially hired as the Patriots head coach. The first black NFL coach for the Patriots anyway. Really some great words from both Jerod and from Robert about where the direction this team is going, and so many questions, and we're going to dive into all of that, Steve and I. But before we get into that, Steve, how you doing today?
Doing well. It's a nice, beautiful day in the neighborhood. We get to hear the new coach speak for the first time. So I was pleasantly surprised that a lot of current players were there in the audience. So, I caught a glimpse of a couple of them, and it was nice to see that. So, I'm looking forward to what's coming next.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much to talk about, Steve, obviously coming out of this. And I think Jerod came across really good in a lot of different ways. I certainly think that you hear him say something, Steve, and you can hear Bill a little bit in him. But he's also his own man, too. I think you saw that. I think you saw the personality. I think you saw the personality come out a little bit. And it just kind of shows you how it is going to be different. It was kind of weird seeing him up there and not Bill. It's like anytime there's any Patriots related press or media thing, you're just expecting to see Bill. So that, just as a total aside, that was kind of odd from my view anyway. There's plenty to talk about coaching wise, titles I thought were interesting, GM, like there's a lot of different ways to go there, Steve. Why don't you go ahead and just give me your takeaway? Give me your overall thoughts on what he had to say today.
Yeah, we all know that Mayo is a really smart guy. He's very well spoken. I thought he did a great job today. He reiterated a couple of times, look, we're just getting started here, because there was a lot of questions of what's the plan moving forward. They were even asked, who's going to be the number 3 pick and who's got the final say on that. And, they danced around that as well. And I get that. I mean, they're starting right from scratch. But overall, I thought Mayo was very impressive, and which I expected it to be. I mean, we all know he speaks very well. He's a very smart football guy. And his former teammates used to call him Little Bill because of his knowledge and seriousness when he was on the field. But at the same time, I remember he had that other side where him and Brady used to love to needle each other during practice, and that's good. That the team needs a little bit of that too. Bill was very stoic. That's just his style. I don't think Jerod will be that way. I think he's going to be, and he mentioned it, you have to get to know your players. You have to know their strengths and weaknesses, and
right.
Paraphrasing here, but whatever. But, I liked what he had to say about the coordinator positions, where he said he thinks having the title is important. And I agree with that. And, Bill did that in a way to take the heat off of his other coaches. There wasn't anything nefarious about it.
Depends who you ask.
Yeah. I mean,
but for Bill, I agree with you. He wanted to be the bulletproof vest for his guys. I mean, his players, his coaches. He wanted to be the one to take the heat when things went awry. And I think you get that same from Jerod. It's like but for Jerod, I'm sure someone will take that comment, Steve, on Boston radio and twist that as a shot at Bill. As soon as I heard it, I go, yep, there's a segment on Felger and Maz on 98.5, 2-6.
Yep.
Talking about, Jerod thinks titles are important. Obviously a shot at Bill. I think it was more about talking about how differentiation of responsibilities, about things that are certain, earned and we'll get into the coordinators here in just a second, because I do want to follow up on just that for just a quick moment. But I did also like, Steve, that you could see him kind of laid back and relaxed at times, but he also has that fire too, which I think is fun. And I mean, I think you and I and a lot of people who are tuning in now, and I'm shout out to everyone who's tuned in live. But I think we knew kind of what he was, but I think seeing him up there, he obviously can command the room, but he showed you that he's going to kind of mix it in. And look, I get it. Like, on the whole of changing everything post-Bill, I can totally understand that you don't want to rock the boat too much. Like, you want to make a change, but it's a weird dance. And the more and more I've thought about it, especially after our conversation yesterday, Steve, to now, our conversation yesterday off air, where I have my concerns, I think I'm starting to understand, like, yeah, you do want to make some changes, but you don't want to just totally throw out the entire thing and start over, scratch it. It seemed like they want to keep some continuity kind of in the building, and I can certainly understand why they'd want to do that. But obviously, I think Jerod's going to bring his own style of things too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the fact that, again, he's his own man, and he made mention, like, he owes a lot to Belichick, which is very true. Belichick drafted him in the first round and coached him for all those years. He was a team captain for 7 of his 8 seasons with New England, and the fact that he differed from Bill on a couple of things, but he basically said, their principles are going to kind of remain the same, which, that's just smart football, So overall, I was pretty impressed with him. Robert, not so much.
Yeah.
He flubbed some of his family members' names, and
Robert, I don't want to make this about Robert, but Robert's shown his age a little bit recently, and you see it at times. What do you think about the Jonathan, the question? I thought that was interesting. I couldn't make out who asked it.
I couldn't make out the voice. It sounded familiar though.
Yeah, but I mean, what do you make about that? Because there's been a lot of talk about Jonathan having a more hands-on approach, and my first thought, Steve, is that like the Kraft's way of kind of dispelling that without actually, like, maybe I don't know. I don't know. Like, there's been a lot of fire to the Jonathan Kraft having more hands-on. Well, maybe him saying that he's in charge of all the companies and there was something important, he couldn't be there today, was kind of one of those, like, yeah, he's going to be here, but he's still in the same role. He's not taking on more what's kind of being presumed by some, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And, and I think that had a lot to do with Robert too, because Robert wants everyone to know that his hands are still, very much in the pie, but he also answered a question, and he was quite clear about it, that, he's not going to be involved in football operations. He says, we hire smart people to do great jobs for us, and they're going to make the decision. He said the only time he would get involved, which he has in the past, when he mentioned if there's concern with maybe the character of a player that the team wants to bring in, and then, that doesn't meet with the Kraft's approval, then that would be the only time they step in. And I think that will go a long way to alleviating some of the questions of whether the Crafts are going to get involved with football operations. But, sports radio, being sports radio, it's going to continue. Those questions will continue to be asked anyway.
Look, I'm not saying that if you own a team that you shouldn't have an input sometime on certain things. Like, I can't think of a really good example off the top of my head, but like let's say that a team, well, in any real sport, like let's say there's a team that's really struggling and they have a really high draft pick and they're starting over, or maybe they're not totally starting over, but they're kind of in the process of a change. You could talk me into the fact that, hey, the owner might need to create some buzz, something for the fans to get excited about. So maybe they're like, hey, look, we need to rebuild this thing, but we got to make sure we get people in the building. Like, we need to get this person. Or I'm struggling to come up with like a good example, but I think there is cases. Point of the matter is that there are cases that an owner should have input, Steve. But just think that I do think that you should be hiring people around you to make those decisions. And I thought that Jerod kind of laid that out at time, and Robert Kraft is certainly talking about it. I mean, Mayo talked ad nauseum about how important it is to put people around him. That gives me hope as a fan, because a lot of what they were saying, Steve, was kind of like obvious. Is it weird that I'm happy they were kind of talking about the obvious? So like they're addressing it. Like they know, like Mayo said, like we know what the problems are. We know we need to fix this. We know we're not good enough. Like I almost am happy and felt reassured from a fan standpoint, and from what we do. From I want to see I want the team to address the quote unquote obvious stuff, that because we need just get back to basics. Don't tell me that you're going to move on from Bill and then try not to rock the apple ship or the apple cart. And things need to change, but we're too scared to change. At least I hear that, okay, they know the problems exist. They're not just burying their head in the sand. So yeah, they don't want to upset everything, but they still know that changes have to be made.
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, they addressed the elephant in the room. And I just wanted to say hi to my beautiful cousin, Andrea, who
hey, Andrea.
commented in. They addressed the things I thought they would, and they needed to.
Right.
They didn't get into specifics, but they already said, we know what needs to be fixed. We can see it. We've done self-scouting, and it will continue. And that will carry on, with the coaches. And, he's yet to hire his coaching staff. And, they interviewed a couple of guys from outside the organization. But, we both heard that Brian and Steve Belichick were offered positions.
Yep. And I want to get to that too. Yep.
Yeah. And I think that's very important. Let
me ask you this. Do you think that some of the Patriots staff decisions could be either currently held up or soon to be held up by what Bill decides? Because you have to think that there are a lot of guys on the team that could follow him. Like I think I know that Josh McDaniels is currently in the mix. For being back with the Patriots. I could absolutely see him following Bill. What do his sons do? You could make the case that he should stay or go. Like the report said, as you just mentioned, they've been apparently offered their jobs back. So what do you think is the likelihood that maybe some of this is just waiting on Bill before they see who's going with him and when what they need to replace or address?
Oh yeah, I think that's absolutely a concern and a factor in everything. If Bill does, well, he's going to get a job somewhere. I mean, he's not going to be unemployed. So, and I agree with what Todd wrote in.
I was just going to share that in just a second.
Yeah, he hates it. And, as you and I talked offline, as much as I wanted to see them keep Bill, and I wanted to see them keep the coach around because I still think he's the best coach in the NFL. They made the decision to move on, so we're not going to keep rehashing whether they should or shouldn't have done it. It's done. And so now I'm excited to see what Mayo can do. But in regards to Bill, I mean, a lot of the staff may follow him because you remember Bill brought in all these guys, basically kind of raised them in a way of saying as coaches. So we don't know who's going to go with him. But in regards to his two sons, I know Bill wanted to see them, stand on their own and, be well established on their own when he retired. So I think there's a very good chance that his sons, I know their dad's only going to coach 1 or 2 more years, but I think there's a very good chance where his sons may decide to stay, and Bill might even push that on them.
And I've heard several people say too, and I think this is definitely a factor. They both have young families, so they have roots here, and I don't think that's something that you should just overlook too. I mean, I think that is certainly something to keep in mind at the very least. I just want to go through a couple of these comments. Todd says, if you're watching, still hate all of this. For me, this hurts more than Brady. I get it. It is for me, it's certainly weird. I did think it was time. I don't want to be a fraud. I did think it was time, but I also acknowledge the gravity of the decision. I still hate it too, Todd, in a way, but it's more of because for me, I'm going to speak as a fan here, simply for me, it's because it's like the chapter is like actually closed. It's hard to even though it's been a different kind of operation the last few years, and certainly after Brady, it still felt like because Bill was here, that whole chapter wasn't really closed, and now it is, kind of here. It just gives it more of like a, kind of like an end date kind of thing, I guess.
Yeah, the finality of it has struck home.
Yeah, it definitely has. And Chris writes in, good question here. Do you think a factor will be how long Bill coaches for? Some staff members may consider staying with the Patriots. I think that Nick Saban actually talked about this recently too, talking about how guys are wondering about his future. And he felt like he talked about how hard this year was on him and how much of a grind it was. And he felt like he was being harder and harder to be, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but how it was hard for him to truthfully tell these guys when he's going to be, how much longer he really had, and I think that's absolutely a factor for Bill. For him going to a new operation, for example, if Josh McDaniels does go to him, I think Josh is okay hitching his wagon to Bill because he's done that throughout the majority of his career, and Josh doesn't have a ton of opportunities, I'm sure, right now, just given how recently it's been since he's left the Las Vegas Raiders. But I think that there'll be some coaches, for example, if Steve doesn't stay here, if Steve Belichick doesn't stay with the team, I think Jerod could look to someone like a DeMarcus Covington who could elevate from a defensive line coach, probably one of the best overall groups, on the entire team last year. I think Covington could get a promotion to a DC role potentially, if Steve was to go, or maybe at the very least take on more responsibility as a guy that you could, go up there. And to Todd's point too, you think size would have kind of been chosen a while between Bill or Jerod and all that. Yeah, I'm sure there have been some form, but I still think you don't know until you really don't know what opportunities are going to be 100% available until Bill finds the specific team, because one team, it could be a little bit different than others. I'm hoping though, Steve, we do see some good turnover on the coaching staff. I'm okay with some of the coaches staying, but I do think fresh eyes, fresh blood is really important, both in the coaching staff and in the personnel office.
Right. And, one of the other factors involves whether or not they go outside the organization. If Steve and Brian decide to go with Bill, then they're going to have to hire a different defensive coordinator. They interviewed one candidate for that. I'm sure that's just in case break glass mode.
Yeah.
But I think they want to keep Steve Belichick as the DC. But all the position coaches, they're in limbo too until that's announced, because the defensive coordinator will have a huge say in the coaches that they hire. I mean, he'll want to work with people that have the same philosophy as he does. So
Sure.
If it's Steve Belichick, I imagine a lot of the faces may remain. Offensively, same thing. Who's going to be the offensive coordinator? Bill O'Brien, Josh McDaniels, or someone else? I've even heard Wes Welker's name tossed around. So.
I've heard Wes Welker's name too, and I'm sure people will be very split on it. But spending some time with with the Shanahan system now, and he's got some experience under him, I find it interesting. I would love to see, like I said, some kind of change, because I just think it's so needed, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I'll be fascinated, honestly, with I guess how much really does change when things kind of settle. I just think water is still finding its level, Steve, and I think it's going to take probably another week or so before we see some things. I know, especially myself, I'm a very impatient person. Like I want that, and I'm in my 30s, so all us young kids want this instant gratification, Steve. But I want to see some changes right now.
I know. I'm the same way.
Deal with it.
Because I want the coordinators named. I want all the position coaches named tomorrow.
I want their birthdays. I want to see the report cards from sophomore year English. I want it all.
I want to know which free agents they're going to keep, which free agents they're going to chase.
I got
and
a list.
Who's going to be the number 3 pick? I want Jerod to answer that all by tomorrow morning.
I do want to. I'm going to put a pin in this and put it off to the side for our next podcast. But I have found it a little interesting that, not interesting, but I have been diving really into the Drake May, Jaden Daniels thing. Okay, and I'm only going to say this, just because I'm going to put this off to the side. This won't be discussed today. This is another show. But I've been looking at that 3rd overall pick and what to do deeper and deeper, and I'm obviously going through and looking at prospects as you and I typically do at this time of year, and I do think it would be interesting right now. For an NFL draft standpoint and from the Patriots standpoint, because it greatly affects them, is Jaden Daniels really worth it in some teams' eyes to be that third that 3rd overall prospect, not just the 3rd quarterback? Is he higher than that in some? The Patriots have the 3rd pick. Like, are people wondering, are the Patriots or Patriots fans just going back with Jaden Daniels, Drake May, because they know that there's a good chance they won't have a shot at Drake May, and they're trying to put Nick Daniels in the conversation, like almost talk yourself into it? And I think that I don't mean that for just a Patriot fan standpoint. I think NFL evaluators are wondering, like, what the heck do you do with Jaden Daniels, who was a day 3 pick to start the year, and now had a Heisman season and in the top 5 and has progressed so well every year? And what the heck do they do? And, if Jerod keeps in-house, do they stick with a more traditional style quarterback? Because Jaden Daniels could literally change how they play offense altogether. And I do think that there's a whole, like, you get into like scheme philosophies and, projections and building. I just think that conversation is going to be an interesting one to have. And the reason I'm talking about it is because of the coordinators, because tell me who's here, and then I'll want to know what kind of prospect we're going to have. It's hard to even answer that, Steve. And the reason I'm talking about that is just going through what the team's going to do on offense. And it's going to be interesting to see who they name, because then I think they might have a better idea of, okay, they're keeping the same guys in place. They'll probably look at kind of keeping some of the same types of players, versus like, oh, hey, they're going with like like an Arthur Smith or like a Greg Roman type, and you're like, okay, Jaden Daniels could make a lot more sense. I don't know. I just think that'll be a good, as we learn more about the coaches, Steve, that will be a fun little discussion to have down the line. But we don't necessarily have to do it today.
No, and I was just kidding that I want him to name all that tomorrow.
No, but a lot of those, Steve, a lot of those questions that we have about from a player standpoint is affected by who they hire by the coaching staff and what
Absolutely,
decisions they have in the
because
front office. And
we don't know if Bill is going to take Josh McDaniels with him wherever he goes, or Bill O'Brien, or maybe both, right? But I do believe that if McDaniels comes back, I think there's a very good chance they may keep Mac Jones around. He's still on a rookie contract.
I have that on my list of things to talk about. Let's put a pin in that one. And I want to read some of these comments, okay? But I want to take a quick break for podcast purposes real quick. We'll step aside. We'll come back. I'm going to answer some of these comments. And then we're going to talk about the Mac Jones aspect, because there's been a weird shift in the wind, Steve. I want to talk to you about that here coming up right after this. All right, and we are back here on Patriots 4th and 2. Derek Havens, Steve Balestrieri. I have my dog trying to climb into the window for those of you who see here, trying to get some attention. I apologize for the distraction. We are here talking about our thoughts on Jerod Mayo and what the Patriots do with personnel changes, so many other things coming up. Steve and I spent a good portion of the top of the show giving our thoughts on the situation. I know a few commenters have written in, so I want to get to that right now. David writes in, do they bring back Josh McDaniels? I think that was certainly rumored about, and especially him being at with Bill Belichick's last game and then this press conference. I certainly think that McDaniels could be in the cards, but I'm starting to wonder if it was more kind of because just getting back with Bill and kind of going with him and talking about his next steps if they're linked. What do you think about that, Steve?
I think that there's a very good chance they bring him back. For one, the stability factor is going to be there, because I really doubt that anyone's going to give McDaniels another head coaching job anytime soon. I think he's not going to even get a phone call for at least 5 years.
Yeah.
If ever. I mean, so if you were to hire him, that stability factor is going to be there. With Bill O'Brien, he's made it clear that, he'd still like a head coaching gig someplace. And I can't fault him for that. So, you may lose him in another year or two. So, if that's the case, then, you're drafting a young quarterback. You don't want to go through that same thing they just did with Mac. 3 years, 3 different coordinators. So, if they were to hire McDaniels, I mean, you're going to have stability there for several years, I believe. So I think that would make sense. Now, as I alluded to earlier, the Mac Jones situation, I think if McDaniels were to come back and Mac is still on a rookie contract, they would keep him. And hopefully McDaniels can, resurrect what was going on with him. So,
right. Todd thinks Mac stays. Chris thinks he's going to leave. We got a couple different people chiming in here. I still think he goes right now, but I do wonder if they think that he was just totally mismanaged. But, Steve, for me, I wonder, that to me it just feels weird. It just feels weird to me, because I feel like you're almost like, if you benched him to the point where you bring in Zappy, does everyone in the building or just Jerod and maybe even the Crafts think that Bill was just screwing up Mac that bad, and they just were hey, we know Bill was done with Mac, but we think that situation was mishandled? I mean, how does that come across to you?
The more I read about it,
it's a weird dynamic.
Yeah. The more I read about it, the more I believe that they thought Bill didn't do right by him. And, we've heard reports that Bill didn't want Mac. He wanted someone else.
Right.
And
there's been a lot of whispers. There's been a lot of busy little bees right around the Patriots organization the last couple of days, Steve. There's been a lot of weird stuff flying around.
Bill never this season. I mean, you go back to the spring, and Bill did not show outwardly any confidence in Mac. Now, once the season started, he reiterated it several times. Mac's the starting quarterback.
Yeah.
Blah blah blah. But early in the season, they because we heard all this. There's going to be a quarterback competition, and Bill did nothing to downplay that. So, and I've heard other reports that Belichick kept starting Mac as a middle finger to Kraft. I don't buy that. Bill, above all else, is about winning. And, he obviously felt that Jones gave him a better chance than Zappi at that point. And then once Jones completely fell apart, that's when he made the move. But I don't buy that, the starting Mac thing was a middle finger to the Crafts. I don't buy
that. Let's turn the page here and look at the general manager. They really didn't want to get into front office structure. Again, people in the comments. Chris, I just like her comment. Is the dog replacing Russ? That's hilarious. They're both pains in my side, but I love them both dearly. But no, she's just a puppy, and she wants to go for a WALK. So after we're done here, that's what I'll be doing. Anyway,
I don't have to worry about that. My bulldog never wants to go
10 steps a day.
Never.
As far as general manager goes, I think there's been a lot of talk about staying internal with Elliot Wolf. I am really interested in as an internal candidate. He's about the only one to me that would be relatively interesting. I personally would rather them go totally outside of it. I thought there was a really good interview on the. Let's see, I want to give proper credit. It was the Six Friends in Football Things podcast by WEEI, and they had Lance Zierlein on, who works for NFL.com, does some really great evaluation work, and he spoke really highly about Elliot Wolf. I've heard a couple of people, outside of the Patriots, kind of bubble, Steve. I've heard a lot of national guys talk about Elliot Wolf very glowingly, very interestingly, and talking about how he's been in a couple different places. And I wonder if that's the case. I'm curious if they wait for a GM until after the draft. They're just going to work with the front office guys they have now through the draft and then figure out if they want to make changes after that. That's scary for me, but I can understand it because you don't want to get rid of guys because they've been working on the same draft now for a long, long time. So it's not uncommon for that to be restarted or reset after the draft, Steve, but it is a little concerning with how important this draft is coming up for the team, especially when you're a franchise that needs so much help, whether it's offensive line, receiver, quarterback. I mean, you can go so many different directions. The idea of not hiring a GM doesn't really sit well with me. What do you think they ultimately do? And do you think Elliot Wolf the leader in the clubhouse right now?
Well, I spoke with Russ this morning because he did his own quick podcast on his own there. And he talked that he believes that the next GM is going to be in-house. So that would probably be Elliot Wolf, right? And that could very well be. But it's not I won't say, it's not extremely rare for the old regime to do the draft and then turn it over to a new group. Buffalo did that with Chris Ballard. Before he was hired, they let the old regime pick the players in the draft. So it's scary in one aspect, but you got to remember the guys that are doing the picking are trying to secure a job themselves, to remain with the Patriots. So they're not going to totally punt on this, because then if they were to, have a horrible draft, then they're not going to get hired by anybody. So
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
it it behooves them to, follow through.
I would like to see. I still would like. Adam Peters would have been my first choice.
Oh, absolutely.
Uh, I really like Mike Bergonzi of the with the
Chiefs,
Kansas
yeah.
City Chiefs, who also has Patriots or has Massachusetts ties. I'm sorry, Everett native. Trey Brown from the Bengals as another guy who's been connected. I would still rather go that route, and I'm very much hoping at the very least they're able to bring one or two of those types of guys higher ups with some kind of role in the Patriots front office, because they need fresh blood and fresh in, they've had they've had some problems with modern age, at offensive talent, especially, and they really need fresh eyes on that. Todd saying, I don't like that at all. I assume to the Elliott Wolf thing, Todd.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just,
that's what, when we were talking about the Elliott Wolf thing.
I get that.
That's what,
look, I'm not happy about it either. I was having I've kind of had a little bit more. I was very worked up yesterday, especially when I talked to Steve about this, because I'm not happy about it really either at all. I'm, after kind of thinking about it and letting this whole thing kind of marinate over the last few days, I personally feel like I just want to see where it goes. I feel like I'm wanting that. I wanted the answers to all these questions, and they're still trying to figure it all out and navigate this. And it's really tough. It is a tough situation, and some of it is, going to be kind of held up until Bill decides where he's going to go and what direction they want to do it. But I don't want to get them in trouble for something they haven't done yet either. I think they want to be. I think it's important for everyone to kind of be patient, and I want to see what they do. Now, if they decide not to hire an ex-GM and we just are sitting around with the same old staff, I'll be sitting there. I don't know. I'll just be sitting there just being like, well, what? There's no transparency here. But I would really like to see several coaches and several personnel guys just go and get some fresh eyes in there, because I think it's time for some significant changes. For the defense, I'd like to keep as much together as possible.
Yeah, and the other flip side to that is we don't know what was going on inside the building, with the, director of player personnel, the scouting, were those guys recommending players that Bill ultimately didn't want. And he just decided to overrule them and take somebody else. Were they giving him good names? I know we did read that, the scouting crew, the scouting department, they were very high on Deebo Samuel, and Bill overruled them and took N'Keal Harry. Now, not saying, everything would have changed, but boy, having Deebo on this team would have been pretty exciting, because you and I both loved him when he was coming out in the draft.
Yeah, certainly. So GM, I think the GM and the coaching staff, I just think we're going to have to be a little bit more patient on Steve, just have a little bit more patience there with the entire situation. I do think we'll have I think we'll have more answers on the coaching staff and the big two pillars being OC and DC. That in my mind, I will be shocked if we have any more concrete information until we know that Bill is going to the Falcons or the Cowboys or the Eagles or the Bills or the Chargers or the Nantucket high school football team, because they need a new head coach. So I don't know.
Foxborough High. Bill always talked about Foxborough High.
That would be kind of a riot, huh? That would be kind of like, all of a sudden Bill's like, you know what? I'm just going to go coach high school football. So that would be fun.
The parents would hate that, because Bill, he'd have them after school for practice, and then they'd be there till 10 o'clock at night breaking down film and whatnot.
I want to spend the last few minutes of the show, Steve. I want to predict the games for this weekend. for the divisional round. Before we do that, is there anything else Patriots related before we go to the wild card predictions?
And we could talk on this subject for hours. So
Go ahead.
yeah, but
Feel
no,
free.
we'll see what the next shoe drops and go from there. I mean, it's going to be a very interesting offseason.
It certainly will be. I mean, I think right now we're still kind of reacting to the Bill news. It's hard. It's hard. There's just so much stuff to process. And so it's like, you react to the Bill news, and now that's kind of set and kind of marinated. Now you got Jerod being announced, which we've known for several days. Now that's officially done, and that is certainly exciting. I think I think we both feel this way. I don't want to speak for you, Steve, really, but like. It does kind of suck with Bill not being the head coach anymore, but there also is some excitement at the same time. Like it's hard. I don't know if anyone saw the Patriots social team put out a cool little video about Mayo on the sidelines with the guys, and you can see him. He fires you up a little bit. It's exciting to see that. At some point I knew, I knew, like, looking within, I'm like, yeah, at some point Bill's not going to be the head coach anymore. So it's just weird to actually see them up there making these announcements and kind of processing that. But it's also exciting to see what's going to come up next as well.
Yeah,
we got a few
absolutely.
more comments.
And to Todd's
Todd,
comment about new uniforms, I want to see them go back to the old the Patriot ones, where their away uniform is the white jersey with the red pants. To me, that was the best uniform in pro football. They need to go back to that. For one, I never want to see the blue on blues again. I don't want anything to do with the blue on blues. I'm all set. I don't like them. Never have. Go to the silver pants. I'm cool with it. I just don't like the same color uniform every single game. I don't know. But anyway, that is an aside, though. As far as the other stuff, as far as our podcast go, just to say this, we have been regularly doing a show on Wednesdays for whenever we can for a long time. We will keep trying to do Wednesdays. I would say, without talking to just kind of doing this on air, like. It kind of just depends on what the news is. Like if next, I'm sure by next week we'll have stuff to talk about. If it's something really big, we'll do a pod as soon as we can. But otherwise we'll stick to the regular schedule while we kind of figure out this. But I think you're going to get some, I think you're going to get some news over between now and next week. I think, especially with Bill, at some point, people want to wait, but they don't want to wait too long. The people want to kind of get a jump on things. Absolutely. And I'm sure Jerry Jones burned up the phone line to Bill after.
Absolutely.
Right after that debacle. Oh, my God.
The games we definitely talk about that. Last question from Chris, because that's a good one. Do you think Jim Harbaugh returns to the NFL? I do. I think he is the Chargers head coach within the next 24 hours.
Or the Raiders.
Yeah, the Raiders is a good one. I'm leaning Chargers, but I think Harbaugh is, Raiders, Chargers, Falcons are in the mix. I think he is announced in the next 24 to 48 hours. But I think I'll just give it a smaller window. By lunch tomorrow, Harbaugh back in the NFL. put it on there. All right. Let's turn the page. Predictions for the divisional round weekend. I'm really excited. These are going to be some really fun games. Steve, that Rams-Lions game was fun last weekend. Two really tough teams, but at the same time, Steve, there was some really bad football last weekend. Some really boring games. There were some exciting games, but it was a weird weekend of football last weekend, and I also think the refs struggled a little bit in a few of them as well.
Imagine
that.
But no, the games were exciting. The only one that I missed on was Dallas.
Yep.
I picked them to win, but I got all the other ones right for a change. So
I didn't even. I have to. I think I ended up picking the Rams and I picked the Eagles. So I don't think I did that hot. So well, maybe we'll ride Steve this week.
I thought you picked Tampa Bay.
I mean, I certainly had. I might have. I'll have to go. Now you got me curious. I want to go back and listen. This is no fun if we're not having some accountability. So I will go back. I will go back and listen. But I did. I think we both said. I think the Tampa Bay thing is one that a lot of people could see coming. But I think a lot of people were like, well, the Eagles are going to turn it around at some point. So I'm not going to pick against them. But I could totally see how that game went. And man, there's going to be some interesting juice. Something juicy came out of some point over the season with the Eagles. Something weird happened, and we're gonna hear something that came out that's gonna get leaked out, because there's no way there wasn't something that flipped that team on its head, because the last 2 months that team is unrecognizable from what we thought. And Jeffrey Lurie in the press box during that game looked like he was gonna send the firing squad or the entire coaching staff to the firing squad. He looked pissed in that press box.
Oh yeah, that team, they were just sleepwalking out there.
Absolutely. So let's go and I'm pull up the NFL schedule right now. Let's talk about the first game. Texans at Ravens. We're doing Saturday afternoon. What are we thinking, Steve? Who do you got and why?
I like Baltimore in this one, but there is a caveat to this, because Baltimore essentially led Pittsburgh into the playoffs by resting a lot of people on their last regular season game. Then they got the bye week. Now they haven't played in 2 weeks. A lot of their players haven't played in 2 weeks. And I'm curious if they come off flat in this one. And if Houston can get some early momentum, they could upset them. But Baltimore's at home. I like the Ravens in this one.
I love that logic. I think that should not be – I don't think that should be discounted, Steve. And on the flip side, or in addition to that, the Texans are hot and they're playing with a lot of momentum. And we have seen teams that get stumbled from too much rest or too much time off. And we've seen teams that carry momentum and catch fire at the right time. I think the Patriots in 2018 are a good example of a team that kind of got hot at the right time. They rolled into that postseason, and Sony Michel and the defense just kind of, they just kind of blasted behind those two things, and then Brady and Gronk got it done in the clutch. I mean, CJ Stroud right now is on fire, and that team is playing with a lot of energy, and D'Amico Ryans has them believing in themselves. I'm still going to go with the Ravens, Steve, but I love your logic, and I don't think that should be discounted, as a factor in this game. And for what it's worth, the Ravens are right now 9.5-point favorites. I think that's way too high.
Yeah, I think this game's going to be a little bit closer than people envision. And, if I'm Houston, I try to come out really fast, because there will be some rust there, for a lot of the Ravens players. But the Ravens they play good ball all season long. And, other than the fact that they kind of tanked that last game.
Yeah.
But I like it. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The next game too, Steve, is also 9.5 points, and it's San Francisco 49ers at home hosting the Green Bay Packers. Man, talk about Green Bay being a team that Patriots fans should want to kind of model right now. After they're in a rebuild, they have a ton of young offensive talent in their first or second years. A young quarterback. That is something that's a team right now that you're just like, man, they were able to kind of get it together. Jordan Love looked great. The Packers just were unstoppable. I loved them setting the tone last week, Steve, getting the ball, going down the field and scored. Dallas was already tight and had a lot of pressure on them in the game going into it. That was easy to see. They basically said, yeah, we know you already are under a lot more pressure than we are. We weren't supposed to be here. Now we're going to put the pressure on you right away. I just thought Dallas just totally crumbled. I'll be surprised if Mike McCarthy keeps his job.
I'm taking the under on that one. I just think he's done.
But we'll see. I mean, I don't know. But anyway, the 49ers, Steve, also had the number 1 seed. Were able to rest some guys. Now they're playing a red hot Packers team. Who do you like here and why? For me, I'm taking the 49ers, but I think it was shown a couple times that Brock Purdy, while he's very good in his role, if they don't have a lot of wiggle room with him, I feel like they just need him to not make mistakes. But if he does turn the ball over, I think the Packers are showing they can put up points. They showed you last week they can put up 41 points on offense, no problem.
Yeah, I like San Francisco in this game. I like their defense to be able to slow down and shut down Green Bay. I think they'll throw some looks at them. Offensively, if they get that running game going, they're just a wagon offensively.
They are. Christian McCaffrey's so good.
Oh, my God. And, everyone keeps talking about quarterbacks for MVP. I don't know how you could say Christian McCaffrey isn't, because when he's on the field, he can do everything, and that's what I think. San Francisco's at home. They'll get that running game going. And, once they get that running game in gear, they're very tough to stop because they can throw so many different looks at you out of the running game. I just love to watch that offense when it's clicking.
Absolutely. Next game we have on Sunday is going to be the Buccaneers at the Lions. Man, Steve, it was cool to see the Lions fans celebrating in the crowd. They're fired up for their team. The Lions are a tough team, man. I like the way that their culture's great. They're fun. They play tough. They play hard. I think that exudes from the way they built on the offensive line. I think that exudes from their head coach, and I think that comes up from Aiden Hutchinson on the other side of the ball. That's just the kind of team they are, and they are fun to watch. But you got the Buccaneers who were really impressive against the Eagles at home. Baker Mayfield's playing with a lot of swagger, a lot of confidence, and now they're coming in. I like the Lions in this one, Steve, but I've been impressed with both teams for a little bit different reasons.
Yeah, I like the Lions in this one too. I just think that, they've been playing really good football all season long. Jared Goff has been really good. They have a good running game. And I just love their head coach. I think he's so awesome.
He's I get it's one of those things where if you're not winning, that would grow tiresome quick. But if he's one of those guys that can really kind of get the guys to circle the wagons, now that they have that momentum and have that juice, they're going to be a tough out.
And they believe,
Yeah, and I think they have a very good chance at being in that championship game next week. Yeah. And look, I don't know who they'll end up playing, but that would be I don't think it's going to happen, but it would be fun if it was, Packers Lions in the championship, in the conference championship game. That would be one that not many prognosticators would have prior to this year. So if we flip the page now to Chiefs at Bills, Steve, I still get worried about Buffalo, still have some reservations about Buffalo on certain things, no question. I just think that they are still better. I still think they're a better team top to bottom than the Chiefs. And I think the Chiefs, while they have had a lot of issues on offense, if this starts to get into a shootout, I wonder if the Chiefs can keep up. And there's really only one person is why I even have any hesitation saying any of that, and that's Patrick Mahomes, because you can't discount what he can do on any given game. And I do think the Chiefs defense, for one, defense travels, and they've been good all year. They play with a ton of confidence, and look, we've seen, Tom Brady. I'm not comparing Mahomes to Brady, settle down, but I'm just comparing. We've seen great quarterbacks that can lead an offense well enough and have good defenses kind of, take over and go on runs in the postseason. We'll see. I don't know, but I still think the Bills are just a better team top to bottom, even with the injury, Steve, and I'm going to go with them at home.
Yeah, I'm going with the Bills at home too. I mean, home field is huge in the playoffs. Um, I think the Bills fans will be out in force for this one. That
Sure.
place will be rocking, and this will be the first time that Patrick Mahomes plays a playoff game on the road. And this is going to be different from him because he's never had to deal with the crowd noise and whatnot, against him in a playoff game. So I like Buffalo at home. Kansas City's offense to me is still, I mean, it's still not all the way there.
It's not.
They have some good players, but it's not the juggernaut it was. And the guy that makes it all go is Mahomes, and he can single-handedly win a game, but so can Josh Allen.
Sure. Absolutely.
And the Bills look different this year now that they have a running game. And, we saw that, with Cook. And of course, then Josh Allen can still run the football as well. So I just think Buffalo at home, they're going to take another close one.
Yeah, if this game was in Kansas City, I think I would probably go with Kansas City because it's just hard to pick against Patrick Mahomes at home. It's hard to pick against Patrick Mahomes because, frankly, I trust him more than Josh Allen because as good as Josh Allen can be, he still has those games where, things get a little out of hand. But I'm looking forward to this game. I'm looking forward to a lot of these games. This is traditionally the best weekend of football throughout the year. I think that not that the 7th seed really watered things down that much last week, but I just thought that last week, Steve, there was a lot of factors, okay, admittingly so, but I thought last week was another example of why the NFL shouldn't have added the extra team in the postseason and definitely shouldn't expand it, even though I'm sure they'll go to 8 teams eventually because they just can't help themselves. But I really like how exclusive the postseason is and how hard it is to do it. And it just brings the best product out. I don't think it's been a good product year for the NFL. And I don't think the postseason week 1 was a good product, but people are still consuming it because we're all obsessed with it. But it's still, I think, noticeably not good. I didn't think a lot of the games were good last weekend, aside from some of the storylines. But I think this weekend we're going to get better because we're getting down to the best quarter of the teams in the league. And I'm looking forward to it. Really, all the games. But that Chiefs-Bills game has been fireworks, for a while now. So I'll be looking for that. And there's going to be a lot to talk about next week, not only with, league-wide, but also with the Patriots. So, Steve, as we wrap up the show, final thoughts, please.
Yeah, I'm very happy with the way the conference went today with Jerod Mayo. And again, I mean, there was nothing unexpected or newsworthy, other than the fact that, he showed that he's his own person, I think, and he's just a very smart football guy, and he commands a lot of respect in the room. You could see that during the press conference.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm looking forward to seeing how Jerod, handles things moving forward. I'm really, really happy about what he can do for this team moving forward. I just think there's a lot of exciting changes from that standpoint. I still think it sucks that Bill is gone, and there's a lot of things that I'm really unhappy with, specifically the GM and stuff. But again, I want to reiterate, I just think people need to let things marinate for a couple of days and settle down, because I think that there's a lot of things, dominoes that are going to fall. And I think Bill going to another team, and when that is made, I think you'll start to see more things happen sooner after that. And then that will give us more time to evaluate it, as well. I want to thank everyone for joining us on this episode of Patriots 4th and 2. If you're watching live, or if you're going to watch it later, please subscribe to us on YouTube. And if you're listening to us, afterwards as a download, please like, share, leave us a review with Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Leaves us high in the podcast rankings so other Patriots fans can find us. I want to thank everyone for tuning in and joining us today. Steve and I had a ton of fun kind of going through it with everybody. And we will see you guys next week. Talk to you then.